Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 92 of Sports Speak, back from a 2-week hiatus. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Well, we got Zoe Alter here because we are less than a week away from the Major League Baseball season. Thought it was going to be a much longer wait when the lockout got started, but only missing a week, and it's going to be made up, so it'll be a full 162-game season. We're here to break it all down for you, and of course, as a Mets fan, I'm not feeling too happy today. Now, I was hoping it was an April Fool's joke since it was April 1st when I first saw it, but Jacob deGrom has some weird injury to his shoulder, which came out of nowhere. He pitched just fine in his first two outings in the spring, and now he's going to be shut down for a month, and the Mets will be without their ace yet again for the foreseeable future. So Max Scherzer suddenly is going to be the opening day starter. Tyler McGill goes into the rotation. So, I mean, it's not terrible, but Jacob deGrom, of course, is the key, and we were just excited to, get to see him back on the field, and not to have him at this point is very frustrating yet again. And it's really showing that Jacob deGrom, as talented as he is, as otherworldly as he is, he's just very injury prone at this point in his career, Zoe.
I mean, yeah, it's really aggravating. Like, I know the second it came out, you texted me about it, and we were texting back and forth, and we were so mad because we've been waiting for so long. And to be honest, I didn't even think we were going to get baseball this season. Like, I don't know how that compromise happened, but I'm so glad it did. But I was under the impression that if we did, it wouldn't be till at least the summer. I thought it was going to be a shortened summer season. And so I was so excited to have baseball back. And then, hey, we find out, classic Mets, you're without Jacob. And that's really, really annoying. And especially, I was reading about the injury when it happened, and it said, this injury, it's like a stress fracture. That's not a common injury for pitchers. Like, that's not something that should happen for pitchers. And apparently it's like, usually you see elbow problems for pitchers, but this is like a shoulder thing, which I think is even more concerning because that's like his whole body. Like, an elbow is one thing, you work with that, but this is like, I don't know. I feel like it's more internal somehow, and it's like not good because it affects the rest of his body. And the fact that it's happening so early, I mean, he pitched 2 games and that was all he could handle. And now he's out for 4 weeks. Like, that's terrifying to me. So I'm so grateful that the Mets had gotten Max Scherzer. I was really excited when it happened, and I'm glad they have him now. But I don't know if he's going to be enough. I mean, with the playoffs expanding to 40% of the entire league making the playoffs, I don't really have too much of a doubt, unless the Mets tank and suck, which could totally happen.
Yeah.
But unless something goes very wrong, the Mets are going to make the playoffs. And as long as Jacob's back by then, I'd be happy. But I wanted to see them make a run. I wanted to see them, give the Braves a run for their money. And I don't know how the Mets can do that without Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer both operating at full speed.
Now, there's a couple benefits. Now, the one good thing is the Mets weren't really winning that many of Jacob deGrom's starts anyway. So as great of a pitcher as he was, he really wasn't that much of a difference maker because the Mets still couldn't give him run support, and they'll give other pitchers run support. They'll give the bad ones run support, but not him. But I thought we had finally broken the trend of LOL Mets happening at this point, because the beginning of the season, Pete Alonso was in that scary car accident. He walks away just fine. Starling Marte, you get worries about his oblique soreness. He's out for a few days. He comes in spring training, and he's been mashing the ball and playing well in an outfield position that he hasn't played since he was with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So I started feeling good, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Jacob deGrom has shoulder tightness. And for any other team, if you just heard somebody had shoulder tightness, you would know that it's not that big of a concern. Maybe it'll balloon into something, but most likely not. But this is the New York Mets and Jacob deGrom we're talking about. And within a day, of course, he's shut down for a month. And even if it's only a month, then he's going to have to rehab and pitch in a bunch of single A games and strike out 9 single A hitters and on 30 pitches. And then he'll be back. And then by then it'll be June 1st. And who knows where the Mets are going to be. So clearly the system is continuing. And Tim, I guess I'll go to you. The NL East, the Mets, the Braves, the Phillies, there's some good teams there. Braves, of course, the reigning World Series champions. This point, especially with the deGrom news now, how do you see the division kind of shaken out early in the year and then at the end of the season?
Well, first off, I do want to challenge your saying of, if you hear shoulder tightness, I wouldn't worry, because I'll tell you that's a New York thing, not just a Mets thing. For example, I can't tell you, especially messaging Raheel, how much I worried once I heard Luis Severino had shoulder tightness just a few days ago and was missing his scheduled start for spring training. Now, of course, he'll end up starting tomorrow instead. But of course, when you hear Luis Severino injury, you always think the worst.
Okay,
So,
but there's still a difference between the Mets injuries and the Yankees injuries. In the last few years, we've had players tripping on batting helmets and falling down the stairs of the dugout. You'd have players getting injured on their farms by getting chased by a wild boar. You know what? The Yankees have been injury prone. I'll give you that. You guys have battled through it and have had some good seasons under Aaron Boone despite that. But it's still not the same thing as what we do.
And Severino isn't deGrom. That's another thing that's totally different. I mean,
he hasn't been a trustworthy pitcher in 3 years at this point.
That's because he's injured every year. He had the one
okay
2017, and he's hurt every single year. So it's been that way. But I do want to point out again, the NL East. You mentioned the Phillies. I'm still not bought into the Phillies. I'm going to be honest. Don't get me wrong. Joe Girardi is a really good manager, but that team still they can make moves, they can bring in big free agents, but at the end of the day, they're still, in my opinion, the same old Phillies. Their pitching staff, yeah, they got guys like Aaron Nola, and Zach Wheeler that look great on a regular basis, but then when it comes to big moments and there's production, it doesn't happen on a regular basis. My big problem, too, for the Phillies has been the bullpen. The bullpen has never been consistent. I don't really think they have a true closer on that roster. And I don't know. I'm just not bought into them. The Nationals, I mean, they're trying to be the worst franchise in baseball again. That is simply put. I don't know anyone that would want to play for the Nationals. Yet somehow they're making some trades and so on. But, I mean, the Braves, we're going to see how this pans out. You lose Freddie Freeman, you bring in, Matt Olson, which is good. But, last year they battled through injuries. They won a World Series championship. But do we see them taking a step back? Again, I always talk about complacency for champions. Not exactly were the Braves complacent. They did make changes, so I will give them that credit. But can you circle this team and say this team's better than last season? I don't know. That's going to be a difficult thing to say. I truthfully still think the Mets are the best team in the NL East, with or without Jacob deGrom, on paper. Because we could have said that last season, and then the Mets did what the Mets do best, and unfortunately, and that's not a shot or anything, but they disappointed below expectations. I had expectations for the Mets last season that they were going to be better than the New York Yankees, and that ultimately let me down. And I have no faith for the Yankees this year, and I still think the Mets are going to be a better team than the New York Yankees. So, I don't know. For me, with or without Jacob deGrom, it's huge, but you actually have someone to rely on this year. You have Max Scherzer, who rarely ever gets hurt.
7 minutes ago, Evan Roberts just tweeted, Andy Martino tweeted, Evan Roberts said, Max Scherzer is dealing with a hamstring injury. What I hear from Mets is they think he'll be okay for the opener. We'll pitch in a sim game tomorrow. Are you kidding me?
Well, I don't know.
That's since we started recording here, folks. So that's how quickly things happen for the New York Mets.
Tim goes, oh, Max Scherzer doesn't really get hurt. And he's like, hold on, read this.
I don't know. Max Scherzer he's a battler, though. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, and this is by no dig at Jacob deGrom, but if there's anything about Max Scherzer, he is a competitor. He will do anything to be on the field, even if he is hurt. And he's shown that throughout his baseball career, even all the way back into college. I mean, I think there was a story on him, if I'm not mistaken, he had a hand fracture in his throwing hand, and he still refused to sit out. He wanted to pitch. So there's a lot of stuff with Max Scherzer throughout his career that shows he's a competitor, which you have to respect. So I'm personally not worried even with the report, but I mean, it's getting time now as well for overall for Jacob deGrom that if you're a fan, obviously you start worrying. I mean, how many years in a row is he going to get these, not just weird injuries, but injuries that turn out could be season ending? And it stinks because really in baseball, if you take the point out of recently, a lot of baseball's greatest players are always hurt. Think about it. Mike Trout can't stay on a baseball field. I mean, hopefully, God forbid, this doesn't happen to Acuna after a season-ending injury last year. But you think about him, and how he changes the game of baseball. Could we see him continue to get hurt? People talk about Aaron Judge, Stanton on the Yankees, about their power and how that changed baseball years ago. Well, and it quite literally is years ago. That's about 4 or 5 years ago now since Stanton's won MVP. And granted, last season, they were somewhat healthy, but they, for a time, were always getting hurt. There's very few players, in my opinion, that could be a Mookie Betts and can always stay healthy. And it's interesting that the game of baseball is changing, but the point is that it's ultimately very, very interesting that some of baseball's best players are always the ones that are most frequently getting hurt and missing games.
I just don't even know what to say at this point for the New York Mets, though. I don't know. And I know this roster is so talented. And I got into this debate on my radio show at Rutgers a few days ago because a Yankee fan was telling me, why aren't you getting excited about the season now? This was 3 days ago. So this was before we found out anything about Jacob deGrom's injury. And I said, it's the Mets. I don't get hyped up until things actually happen. And of course,
and then you still have to be cautious. When things start to happen, you should be even more scared than you were before the season started because something will go wrong.
Let's also not forget the Mets played their best last year when everybody was hurt and they had like all these replacement players in like the month of May when 7 of their starting 9 were on the injured list. So you never know. When you look at this team on paper, there's so much talent, but it's the Mets. The one thing I am happy about is that Zoe Alter is the manager, because I think that was a great hiring by Steve Cohen to bring him in and bring in an established manager, because Luis Rojas, nice guy. I think he was in over his head over the last 2 years. And we know now that Mickey Callaway is a bit of a kooky character, and I'll just leave it at that. But
so hold on. So then I have to ask this. Instead of your next LOL Mets moment, it's going to be in the middle of a wild card series, game 3, where instead of bringing in your best reliever, you're going to bring in Jeurys Familia to blow the game again.
Well, Jeurys Familia is not on the team anymore, so he's in Philadelphia. And the Phillies always blow games against the Mets because of their bullpen, so that's going to continue.
That's going to be so ironic. Watch him beat the Mets is what's going to happen. Like, just because that's the Mets' luck, it's going to be Familia pitching for them when the Mets lose a game that they needed to win. Yeah.
And I do want to ask you guys this question, just staying on the topic of baseball. I mean, how do we feel about Major League Baseball's changes to going back to the extra inning rule? I personally don't like it.
It's ridiculous. I thought, first of all, I thought the agreement was that they were getting rid of the Ghost Runner, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere last week, they say, oh, by the way, the Ghost Runner's back for 2022. I like most of the changes. I like the schedule changes next year that now you play every team, because as a Mets fan, I get very sick of seeing them playing the Miami Marlins 19 times a season. So I like that. I like some of the other changes. Obviously, financially, the players and the owners were able to kind of find a median where they could agree. So they were able to come to that agreement, which is really good. But as a fan, I hate the Ghost Runner rule, and I don't like it in Major League Baseball. I don't understand why it's back.
I agree. Same thing. I was so excited for them to get rid of that because that rule's so annoying. Because when you start with a runner on second, literally a single scores him. And then that changes the whole dynamic of the game because normally the thing in extra innings is you have to be so careful with how you get guys on base, right? Because if you get a guy on base, you bunt him over or you do something where you get him over. If you start with a guy on second, I feel like it ruins a lot of that strategy and a lot of that excitement of playing there. And then it also makes games go into higher scores than they should. Because say a game is a close game, right? It's a 1-1 game going into extras. And then it ends up being a 4-5 game. And it's it shouldn't have been a 5-4 game. It should have been a 2-1 game. And I don't know. I feel like some of the excitement of extra innings is who's going to get on base first, right? Who's going to break that barrier? Because once you break that barrier, you have momentum. But you start with that momentum with the runner on second. And I don't really like how that plays out. And the other thing that I will say that I don't know how to feel about is the 40% of teams making the playoffs. I'm not sure how I feel about extended playoffs. I think a big part, and especially baseball, is teams fighting for that wild card, for those wild cards. And by adding a third wild card, I don't know how that's going to work because then those two teams who were fighting for the second wild card, they both make it in. And then that's kind of less fun because it's almost as if the playoffs start a little bit earlier when teams are fighting for that wild card because it feels it's higher stakes. But if both teams make it, then the only teams who are missing it are teams that are rebuilding or sucky teams, right? Or teams that had something happen to them like it happens to the Mets every year. And the teams that are making it, I understand that there's that incentive to be, the higher seed and get a bye and everything. But even like we saw that in the NFL this year, and that wasn't even that exciting. It was like, okay, the Packers get a bye, but what else is that exciting about that? Because you had to watch a bunch of games that were sucky games because you had someone really good against someone really bad. And normally things don't happen there. And I think, especially in a thing like baseball, where it's not just a one game, it's a whole series. And with the whole series, I think that leaves room for injuries and that leaves room for other things to happen. So personally, I don't think I like the 40%, but I don't know how you guys feel about it.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, but we have to remember it's all about that TV money, the cha-ching for baseball. That's why all these leagues, you think about it, the NBA, the NFL, now the MLB, have all expanded their playoff format in some way over the last 2 to 3 years. But it just makes more sense in the other leagues. In the NBA, for example, you have teams that go through injury bugs. The season is 82 games, but it's not nearly as long as the Major League Baseball season. And the way the seeding works, the play-in tournament is going to be interesting. But even without that, just having 8 teams in the playoffs, which is more than 50% of the league, because of the injury bug, because teams go through phases, and because the season isn't that long, you still have the chance where you get lower seeds that have a chance to pull off upsets. Right now, the Brooklyn Nets, I don't really agree with it even as a Nets fan, but they're the number 2 favorite to win the NBA championship, according to Las Vegas, even though they're probably going to be in the play-in tournament and likely an 8 or even a 9 seed going in. But that's what the NBA playoffs creates. The NFL, similarly, I mean, they have a 16-game schedule. It's a 17-game schedule now, shorter season. I don't really like it as much in the NFL, especially since it's only one game. And we've seen 7 seeds getting their doors blown off these last 2 years since they've done this. I mean, the Chicago Bears in 2020 were an embarrassment. It should not have been.
They had no business being there.
But see, I'll make the debate about the NFL only for one reason. Granted, before the NFL transitioned, obviously, to adding 17 games, you have to remember the NFL was able to make this accommodation, without expanding a week of the playoffs, which is what I think the most important portion about it is what you have to remember. I mean, think about it. It still follows the same process. You're just adding more teams, and you're giving one bye instead of 2. So it's a different way of thinking about it, which for the NFL, I mean, at the end of the day, I didn't see as much of a problem as to it than Major League Baseball, for example, you mentioned. I mean, there's a possible chance with the way this all works out, that we could see a team below 500 win the World Series. In past formats, it's obviously a lot more difficult with the original rules. It became very rare seeing a team making a wild card and so on. But now there's a high possibility we could see a team that's below 500 make a big run, which is it's scary to think about, because if you have a losing record, you probably shouldn't be a playoff team. And I know this isn't football, where, for example, the Philadelphia Eagles or whoever wins the NFC can surprise the world. But I mean, I don't know. I just don't like it for baseball for the fact of, don't get me wrong, the wild card series, in my opinion, needed a 3-game series, not a 1. But expanding the playoffs and then expanding the series, to me, that's just way too much. And it's going to guarantee, don't get me wrong, baseball's going to play into November, but it just, to me, it doesn't make sense to get this unnecessary expansion when you're already playing 162 games. And we know injuries as we go into October and November only get more and more dangerous. And you have to remember there's an off season that's going to be shorter as a result. And they'll come back to spring training to try to get ready for March yet again, which is not even a month and a half break, and these players are going to continue to work during the off season and only risk themselves of injury even more.
Yeah, it's, and just kind of branching off that, for Major League Baseball, you have a 6-month season. What makes it compelling is that there's a fight for so few spots. When you have so many postseason spots for a season that lasts so long and is an everyday thing for 6 months, it makes those first 3 months just completely meaningless, because you can have a bad start and you can still find a way into the playoffs. And like Tim said, you can be below 500 and you can potentially go on a deep playoff run. I know we saw that with Houston 2 seasons ago, but that was in the 60-game season. That was different. In a real 162-game season, an expanded postseason, I don't think really fits with baseball unless they shorten the schedule, which I don't think they should do. I think they should just stick with the way it was going. I know some people had problems with the 1-game wild card playoff, but I think it made it exciting. I think that format was just fine. I don't really see why there was a need to change it. But I want to talk about, looking into this season, I'll go first, and then we can kind of go around here. Your favorites in the American League and the National League, and who you think might be playing in that World Series in November. For me in the National League, I still got to go with the Los Angeles Dodgers. I mean, I know Corey Seager's gone. They add Freddie Freeman, which, by the way, I can't believe that happened, that Freeman left Atlanta, went to the Dodgers. Today, they trade for Craig Kimbrell. So now all of a sudden, Kimbrell's in that bullpen, which is already very stacked with a mix of veteran guys and some young talent. And then the rest of that offense, you still got two former MVPs in Cody Bellinger and Mookie Betts out there. I know Bellinger had a step back last year, but is still a talented player. You got Max Muncy on that offense. You got Justin Turner all around. Will Smith is a catcher, not the Will Smith that slaps comedians, but the Will Smith that is a catcher that can hit 300 and is potentially an all-star this year. That is a very great team, and the pitching is still really solid. They bring back Clayton Kershaw on a one-year deal. Walker Buehler. I don't see anybody stopping the Dodgers. I mean,
they just got Kimbrell as well.
Yeah. Kimbrell for AJ Pollock. In the American League, I think I was thinking about the Toronto Blue Jays, but this team did lose Marcus Semien. They did lose Robbie Ray. They made some big additions, don't get me wrong, and of course the younger players are still progressing. I don't know if they're making the World Series this year. So as much as it pains me to say, but it's a great rivalry, and of course it'll get pumped up a lot. Even though Carlos Correa is gone, the Astros have found some good pieces. Right now, I'm saying Astros-Dodgers matchup in the World Series, but I think the Dodgers are finally going to make up for that 1 year. There's, of course, how ironic is it that the Dodgers and Lakers, their two championships have been considered pretty fraudulent, the Lakers in the bubble, the Dodgers in the 60-game season. I think the Dodgers are going to silence all the haters, including myself. I think they're finally going to get it done this year. Maybe 6 games, maybe 7, but I think the Dodgers, I'll go within 6 games over the Houston Astros in the World Series in November. Zoe, how about you?
You kind of took my prediction. I'm a little sad about it. I was excited for you to go Blue Jays, and then I was like, damn it, he took my prediction. So I'll switch it up a little bit. I think there's no way the Dodgers don't make it. Like, in my opinion, I don't see anyone who could even come close. Every minute that I think they're like this crazy super team, they keep adding these other players, and I just don't understand how it's happening. And I love having no salary cap in baseball. Like, it's one of my favorite things about baseball. But right now, it's also one of my least favorite things, because say the Mets do make a run, right? In some crazy world, they do make a run. They're going to get smothered by the Dodgers. They're not even going to come close because the Dodgers are so good and they have such a deep roster. So on that side, I think you have to go Dodgers. I don't think you have another question. And I wanted to say Astros, but now I'm not going to because you said it. I think a really cool dark horse, I'm not going to pick them, but I think a dark horse would be the Angels. And I know it's like kind of weird because they kind of suck, but I feel like there's something so special about Ohtani and seeing them play that like something could come together for them if they get hot really quickly. They have the pieces to put it together. However, I think I am going to go Blue Jays because I'm such a Blue Jays fan. Like, I said it last year when I was talking with you guys and we were previewing. I told you Vlad Guerrero Jr. was going to be he was going to be the MVP. Obviously, like I'm just obsessed with them. I don't know what it is. It's just something about them is so fun. And when they go on these hot streaks, they're more fun to watch than anyone. They're as fun to watch as the Dodgers are. I mean, when you go through their lineup and just one guy hits after the other, it's so fun to see. So I think it would be the most fun, and I would love to see a Blue Jays Dodgers World Series.
I like your Angels pick, but my problem is this. They still don't really have great pitching aside from Shohei Ohtani, and they signed Noah Syndergaard, who's only pitched 2 innings in the major leagues in the last 3 years. So,
but he was great when he was great. He was great when he was great. If you can get back to that, they need to work on their pitching a little bit, but I mean, I think you can work through one guy, and Shohei is to the point where Shohei is so good that I think he could boost the team and lead them up. I think he needs some reinforcements, but I think if they could come out strong and have their bullpen carry them through and they sign a few guys, I think they could be okay.
Tim, how about you?
I'll say this first off on the NL side, the Dodgers is, for me, still the easy pick with the constant change and how they're constantly redefining this franchise. every single year. I do want to mention a dark horse, though, and I know this is going to sound weird, but a team that I would consider, I'm not saying that they're going to win a World Series or go to the World Series, but I think are going to be a lot better this year is the St. Louis Cardinals. I think that they, like Boston last year, were very, very under the radar this offseason, and they're slowly starting to build back to the form of what we remember the Cardinals being.
And Albert's back.
Albert Pujols, of course, is back, which adds motivation. But I think the big thing is now with this DH rule, especially, they have that capability of adding more offense. Now, of course, they'll have Albert for the year, and then we'll see what happens going on the next year after he retires. But the point is that they're slowly working on this team, getting themselves better. And again, we remember the Cardinals being a playoff contender every year, even if they weren't winning World Series after Albert Pujols had left. I really think there is potential for this team to come back in the NL Central that is only continuing to get more and more weak every single year when it's all said and done. The Pirates are not going to do anything. I'm still not bought in the Cubs, for the record. I mean, the Brewers, in my opinion, are regressing, even though they have good starting pitching. And I mean, with that being said, you're talking about three teams that you can feel are falling apart. It's very possible for seeing them to compete for a Central Division or even coming in the top two. However, on the AL side, God, I'm going to be the most hated person in New York for saying this, but, Zoe, you picked the Toronto Blue Jays. I've got the Boston Red Sox. It's time. I don't know what else to say. The Boston Red Sox are back, and they should be a threat taken seriously. Now, don't get me wrong. The Rays are going to be good. They're going to have a real good pitching staff, as always. But, my God, I mean, Boston last year had such an under-the-radar year. They turned around, had a great record, was competing for division title. They got a little bit cocky. Yeah, they lost Kyle Schwarber and all that, but they turn around and they still make great signings in free agency. And, yeah, don't get me wrong, they still need a first baseman, but that could all be traded for during July. This team is good enough to play good offense, play good enough baseball offensively that even with the pitching staff that might I add, he's still going to get better. I mean, we can't undermine. Finally, last season, we got to see Chris Sale come back. Do we see a good Chris Sale again? You don't know. And of course, that pitching staff too could use a little bit of work, but it's good enough to win baseball games. And most importantly, in my opinion, it could be good enough to sneak a World Series away from the Dodgers. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, every year we talk about teams that are good on paper. I mentioned last year, Mets are one of the best teams in the NL on paper. They finished below 500. The Dodgers, they don't follow that protocol. They're always one of the best teams on paper, and they're always making the playoffs, since the run all the way back to 17. But there always could be a surprise to knock off the Dodgers. But you've got to wait till September really to find who has that momentum, because no one expected the Braves to win a World Series last season. They expected the Nationals to win a World Series back when they did. So the fact of the matter is anybody can still beat the Dodgers. That's the beauty of baseball. But if there's a team in the AL side that can knock them off, I think the Boston Red Sox can do it.
My problem with Boston is just the pitching, because they have a great offense. They've developed some talent. They got a great manager in Alex Cora, who flawlessly and seamlessly came back from his 1-year suspension. And to turn that team around, they were just fine. Had the bad 2020, all of a sudden they're back contending for a World Series last year. I just worry about the pitching, because we've seen some American League teams take positive steps in that direction. I don't really know if Boston is there yet, but their offense is going to be lethal. And Trevor Story, I think they're going to be the best hitting offense aside from Toronto this year, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to get that far. And the AL East is very stacked. The Rays, of course, no matter who they have out there, are a great team. And, the Yankees, who knows what happens with them, but they do have some talent on their roster. But final 10 minutes of the show, let's shift gears a little bit. Since we have Zoe here, this is the first time she's been here since her favorite player in NFL history, Tom Brady, came out of retirement. So how are you feeling about Brady being back in the NFC again?
Okay, not gonna lie, I actually kind of saw this coming, because when he retired, I feel like he would have wanted to break his own retirement. Like, I feel like he would have wanted to say, hey, I'm done, I'm stepping away. And I always got that feeling from him. He loves the spotlight. That Brady loves it. He loves it. Yeah. And I get that, like, that's a thing. And like, it was great that whatever, it was great for him. But Brady wanted to break that news, and he did. And he was silent on social media for a couple of days after it happened. And then he made his post and he was like, yeah, I'm done, whatever. But I didn't think he felt very satisfied with that. And I had a feeling that we were going to see him come back at some point. I didn't know when, I didn't know to who, I didn't know if it would be the Bucks, but he wasn't done. And I think he started to feel like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do without football, especially if you think about the fact that he came into the league when he was a kid, and now he's a full-grown adult with kids and everything. And he's never really lived a life. He went straight from like partying in college to being an old man who gets sore in the morning. Like, he had no in between. So I think we're going to see more of him in football. However, the Bruce Arians thing threw me off a little bit. I was confused about that because he just got Brady back. He had a lot of his players still on, and I didn't fully understand that decision. Maybe he was just done with the antics and everything, but I think if Brady knew that, I don't know if he would have come back, especially to the Bucks, because I think that changes their trajectory, having to deal with a new coach their first year.
Well, I just want to chime in on it. I think that what we're going to see now from Tom Brady, and don't get me wrong, we saw what Todd Bowles did with the Jets. He's a real strong defensive mind, really, really good. But what I think we're going to see for Tom Brady is we're going to see him Peyton Manning role. Not that Tom Brady didn't already have that superstar power in him, but I really think we're going to see Tom Brady take over the offense completely, and that he's going to have the full 100% say of what happens on the football field, really for the first time in his career.
Yeah, I think so. And it's just puzzling, the whole thing with Arians, because I know a lot of people are saying, is this because of a fractured relationship between he and Tom Brady? Did that contribute to Brady deciding to retire and then ultimately unretiring? I don't know, because he's still staying in the front office, so he's still going to have at least some say with this team. It's really complicated to really gauge it at this point, but Todd Bowles is going to have some pretty big shoes to fill. And of course, Todd Bowles has been a head coach once, and it did not go well at all. So, I mean, he's a great coordinator. I don't know about his head coaching ability, especially was going to be dealing with a Buccaneers team that has been known for its antics over the last couple of years. Fortunately, the main precipitator of those antics, Antonio Brown, is no longer on that team. Maybe he'll find himself on another roster, but it's going to be interesting to see for sure how this all develops. My point that I was trying to get to was this: the NFC now is much easier than the NFC was last year. Of course, the Rams are going to be looking to go back to back. They bring in Bobby Wagner on that defense, fills the Von Miller hole quite well. And Packers do have Aaron Rodgers, even though it seems like they had to give up the entire rest of their team to keep him there. So those teams are going to be solid, but outside of that, there's really no other guaranteed forces. Whereas, in the AFC, it's so tough to navigate. I think the NFC is one of the easier conferences to get through right now than we've seen in the past few years, especially since the Rams, it's very difficult to repeat in the NFL. And there's a good chance the Rams kind of take a little bit of a step back, and the Packers, Aaron Rodgers doesn't have anybody to throw the ball to. So it's really the Bucs at this point. So even if Todd Bowles struggles out of the gate, he's got Tom Brady as his quarterback. The team has weapons. They have a solid defense, lost a couple offensive linemen, but brought a couple in. So kind of a net positive there. So this team's still going to be really, really good. And I think they're going to be a favorite in the NFC. One more topic I wanted to kind of jump to quickly with Zoe is, with Aaron Rodgers back, but without any weapons in the NFC North. And we got the draft 3 weeks away. So for your beloved Detroit Lions, is there any chance that this team might do something right and have, a decent season next year?
Okay. The chances of them having a decent season are very much up in the air. However, I think they are going to do the draft right, especially because I don't know if you guys saw it, but Detroit's getting the draft in a couple years. And that's pretty big just for all the Detroit momentum and stuff. And the Dan Campbell era, I'm really enjoying it. I have to say, at first I was like, oh, it's just another head coach, we'll be done with him in 2-3 years and it'll be someone else who comes in. But I'm getting a different feeling from Dan Campbell. I'm getting the players really like him. It's a lot of fun. The issue I have with the Lions is at QB. It's Jared Goff. And after this year, Jared Goff's going to be gone. I don't see any way the Lions re-sign him. They're going to be looking for a young QB. I think what's most likely to happen is they try to get Thibodeau at their spot. I mean, obviously, personally, I think Thibodeau would be better for the Lions just because, I don't know, I feel like he's a better fit and he's just more of an athletic freak, which for me, like, I want that. He knows the game. It's just a little bit about his motivation, but I think he'd be really good for the Lions. And I think that with their later pick, with the 32nd pick, I think they may go QB there because that's kind of the place where I don't know if a lot of teams are going to be taking QBs early, and there's not a very strong QB class. So you'll have some of the best QBs in the class still there at 32. You have someone you can groom into a really good QB. And as much as we like to hate on Jared Goff, I do think he could teach a QB a couple things. He came into this league pretty young. He started, he played, he learned from Sean McVay, and I think he could give some of those things to a younger player. So I think the Lions could be somewhat decent. I think we're going to see them go maybe around 500, maybe hit the playoffs. I don't see them going very far in the playoffs. It's getting progressively darker around me. I don't know if you guys see this, but you can barely see me anymore. Yeah, but this is what happens when I talk about the Lions. It gets like dark. But I don't know. I think it's going to be good. I was pissed when I saw Aaron Rodgers was coming back. I thought we were rid of him. I thought he was gone. And then he came back and I was like, there's no way. However, with Devontae Adams leaving, I don't think the Packers are going to be as strong as we've seen them in past years. Even, I know they were really good last year, but we saw some struggles. I think everyone saw some struggles, some weaknesses, and they were able to sneak by because the rest of the NFC North was so horrifically bad that, like, they were able to pick up those 6 wins easy, and that helped them a lot. But I don't know. I'm pretty excited for this season. I think I'm excited for the seasons after this one, but I'm more excited for this season than I have been once in the past.
So I guess we have a couple minutes left. I kind of wanted to rant about this. I know Zoe's not NBA is not really her thing, but I do have to bring it up on this show because the Nets played the Bucks last night. And I know I had a pretty big rant last summer when the Nets lost to the Bucks in the playoffs as Zoe's room gets creepily darker. Oh, there we go. But the Nets last night lost to the Bucks. Now they're tied for 8th, which is very scary territory. Because if Brooklyn falls to 9 or 10, that means they have to win back-to-back games to even make the playoffs through the play-in tournament. They have to stay in the 8th seed because I don't trust this team to win back-to-back games. And they also have to stay in the 8th seed so that if they win, I don't know, if they win one game, they could get to the 7 seed and avoid the Bucks in the first round. Because last night was pretty apparent they're not beating the Bucks, but they kind of beat themselves last night. Kevin Durant missed a couple of shots, but I don't understand why LaMarcus Aldridge isn't playing, why Blake Griffin isn't playing. They could have defended Giannis Antetokounmpo. Instead, they've got Andre Drummond, who has the speed of a sloth out there. There's no way he was going to close out on that Giannis 3 at the end of the fourth quarter. I mean, how do you let the Bucks come back down 12 in the fourth quarter after their second best player gets ejected from the game? They did not have Chris Middleton, who's usually the guy that closes out the games and is the reason they won game 7 over Brooklyn last year. So I don't understand this. Steve Nash, I've had many questions about his coaching. I also don't understand why Kyrie Irving wasn't involved at all last night on the offense in the fourth quarter and overtime. I know Kevin Durant is the leader of this team and the best player, but I mean, Bruce Brown was getting more touches than Kyrie Irving. I don't get it. So the Nets are in dangerous territory. I think it's insane that they're still listed as the number 2 favorite to win the NBA championship because they do not have that talent. I think they could get through the first round depending on who they're matched up with. But beyond that, I don't see this team going on a deep run in the playoffs at all. But just had to get that out on this show. But that'll just about wrap things up. A reminder to follow along with our NASCAR Pick'em, which I continue to beat Tim in each week because he was about to beat me on the final lap, and then Kyle Busch decided to spin out from 6th place and finish, 28th or something?
Yeah, I cannot catch a break. I mean,
I'm up by
there's not a single pick I think has finished in the top 10 yet. I don't think I've had a single one.
Last week was my first one that didn't, and it was like Cindric and like 12.
Every week I've picked Kyle Busch too. He's crashed. I got to stop picking Kyle now.
Well, we got Richmond this weekend, so you can follow along on our Twitter at SportsSpeak Live to see what goes on there. Zoe Alter, thanks again for joining us today on SportsSpeak.
Of course. course, I can never relate to the NASCAR conversation, but I'm pretty good with everything else. So thank
Yeah,
you for having
we
me.
should let you into the NASCAR pick'em. Come on. Yeah.
I would be sitting here with my mouth open, not understanding a word you're saying, literally nothing.
You'd probably still be doing better than Tim because Tim has just had no luck this year.
Listen, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to say it right now. My pick for this weekend is back-to-back wins for Ross Chastain. It's a bold pick, but I'm going for it.
This is going to be the week he crashes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to just about wrap things up. Again, thank you for tuning in. We'll have more coverage of the opening day for Major League Baseball. We'll see how many players in the Mets are left standing at that point. But for Zoe Alter and Tim Moore, I'm Eddie Kalegi, signing off on episode 92 of Sports Speak. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend.